Picture this, if you will. August 15th, 1842. The American frontier, 2025. That vast, unforgiving crucible where civilization met the raw wilderness and neither side gave quarter. The sun hangs mercilessly overhead like a brass coin in a cloudless sky, baking the New Mexico territory until the very air shimmers with heat. And there, sprawled flat against the burning sandstone of a nameless ridge, lies a 26-year-old man whose name will echo through frontier legend for generations to come, Thomas Morrison. In this moment, he's nobody special, just another buckskin-clad scout trying to make his way in a land that devours the weak and forgets the unremarkable. But history, my friends, has a peculiar way of choosing its players. Sometimes it selects kings and generals. Sometimes it picks a solitary figure with a rifle, positioned at exactly the right place, at exactly the right moment. 800 yards below Morrison's vantage point, 43 mounted raiders circle a small wagon train like wolves around a wounded deer. These aren't your romanticized Hollywood bandits. These are hardened killers led by James Red Jack Carlton, a man whose reputation for brutality stretches from Santa Fe to San Antonio. Carlton has made a career of preying on isolated travelers, leaving behind burned wagons and unmarked graves. The mathematics of this encounter seem carved in stone. 43 armed men against a handful of settlers. The outcome appears as inevitable as sunrise. But Thomas Morrison sees something different through the dancing heat waves. He sees a problem of physics, meteorology, and human psychology rolled into one impossible equation. 800 yards, nearly half a mile, through air thick enough to chew, with dust devils spinning across his line of sight like miniature tornadoes, a crosswind gusting at 20 miles per hour, strong enough to push a carefully aimed bullet several feet off target. Now, understand something about long-range shooting in 1842. This isn't the era of precision optics and computer-calculated ballistics. Most frontiersmen considered themselves lucky to hit a man-sized target at 100 yards. 200 yards was the realm of experts. At 800 yards, that was the stuff of tall tales told around campfires after too much whiskey. But Morrison isn't most frontiersmen. He's the product of an extraordinary confluence of cultures and techniques that came together in the melting pot of Fort Defiance. Raised by a widowed mother who refused to leave the frontier after his father's death, Morrison grew up in a place where Cherokee, Mexican, and American military traditions collided and blended. From age 7, he learned to read the invisible language of nature from Joseph Crow Feather, a Cherokee tracker whose ability to predict weather patterns and wind shifts bordered on the supernatural. The old warrior taught him that the earth itself spoke to those patient enough to listen, how the flight of birds revealed air currents, how the bend of grass telegraphed wind direction, how the very smell of the air could predict its movement minutes in advance. Later, Colonel Eduardo Vasquez, a veteran of Mexico's military academy, refined Morrison's raw talent with the mathematical precision of Spanish military doctrine. Vasquez understood ballistics as a science, bios, the precise relationship between powder charge, bullet weight, barrel length, and environmental conditions. Under his tutelage, Morrison learned to calculate trajectories like an artillery officer, compensating for drop and drift with mechanical precision. The rifle Morrison cradles against the sandstone embodies this unique fusion of knowledge. It started life as a standard Hawken, EIS, the preferred weapon of mountain men and serious frontiersmen. But Morrison has modified every critical component. The barrel bears his own revolutionary rifling pattern, spiraled grooves cut with painstaking precision to impart exactly the right spin to his specially cast bullets. Those bullets aren't standard lead. They're forged from galena ore, harder and more consistent than typical frontier ammunition. Even his powder charge has been measured to the grain, creating a consistent muzzle velocity that most shooters of his era could only dream of achieving. But all the technical precision in the world means nothing without the human element. And as Morrison settles into his shooting position, every lesson from his unique education crystallizes into a moment of perfect focus. He reads the wind like Crow Feather taught him, not just its current direction, but its rhythm, its tendency to gust and settle in predictable patterns. He calculates the bullet's arc like Colonel Vasquez showed him, accounting for the gradual pull of gravity over 800 yards of flight. Below, Red Jack Carlton raises his arm to signal the final charge. The wagon train's defenders, 2 men and an elderly woman, clutch their weapons with the desperation of people who know death is riding toward them. Among them stands Mary Whitman, an educated young woman from Boston whose father had foolishly believed that civilization and savagery could coexist peacefully on the frontier. In moments, her illusions will be shattered either by Carlton's bullets or by something far more extraordinary. Morrison's breathing synchronizes with the wind patterns, each inhalation and exhalation timed to the natural rhythm he's learned to feel in his bones. His finger finds the trigger, not the hasty jerk of an amateur, but the slow, inexorable pressure of a man who understands that haste is the enemy of precision. He waits for that perfect moment between heartbeats when his body achieves absolute stillness. The shot, when it comes, splits the desert silence like thunder. For 2 endless seconds, time seems suspended. The bullet traces an invisible arc through the superheated air, crossing 800 yards of hostile terrain while gravity and wind attempt to drag it off course. Mathematics and instinct, science and art, all compressed into a piece of lead no bigger than a man's fingertip. Red Jack Carlton tumbles from his horse as if struck by the hand of God himself. The effect on his men is immediate and devastating. These are hard cases who face down cavalry charges and Apache war parties. But what they've just witnessed transcends their understanding of what's possible. Their leader, Invincible Red Jack, has been killed by an invisible enemy firing from an impossible distance. Panic spreads through their ranks like wildfire. Horses rear and bolt. Men who moments before were confident predators become terrified prey, scanning the ridgelines for a threat they cannot locate or comprehend. In her journal that night, Mary Whitman will coin the phrase that launches a legend, an impossible shot. She writes, "Fired by a guardian angel or the devil himself." Within weeks, her account will spread through trading posts and settlements across the territory. The story will grow with each telling, but the core truth remains unshakable. 43 armed raiders scattered by a single bullet fired from an impossible distance. Morrison himself vanishes as quickly as he appeared. When the wagon train's survivors reach the ridge where the shot originated, they find only scuff marks in the sand and a single spent cartridge case. No demands for payment, no grand pronouncements, no theatrical flourishes. Just the work of a craftsman who has demonstrated the highest expression of his art. But legends, once born, take on lives of their own, and as Thomas Morrison melts back into the vast anonymity of the frontier, he has no idea that he's just lit a fuse that will burn for the rest of his life, and long after. The question that should terrify him isn't whether he can make shots like this again. The question is, what happens when everyone believes he can? 6 months after that legendary shot, Thomas Morrison emerges from the wilderness like a man reborn. But this isn't accidental, it's calculated. The anonymous scout who vanished into the mountains has spent those months thinking, planning, and making a decision that will reshape his destiny. When the Butterfield Stage Company approaches him with a security contract, Morrison doesn't just accept it, he rewrites the terms entirely. $500 monthly. Let that number sink in for a moment. In 1843, that's more money than most territorial governors earn. It's 10 times what an experienced scout typically commands. The Butterfield executives think Morrison has lost his mind when he presents his demands. Then they remember Red Jack Carlton's body tumbling from his horse, and suddenly $500 seems like the bargain of the century. Morrison understands something that most men of his era don't grasp. Reputation is a commodity that can be manufactured, marketed, and monetized. But like any valuable product, it requires careful cultivation. Over the next 8 months, he orchestrates 3 confrontations that will cement his legend forever, each one designed to showcase a different aspect of his supernatural abilities. The first comes in March of 1843 at Sunrise Canyon, a narrow gorge that serves as the gateway to the richest silver claims in the territory. 15 claim jumpers have taken control of the pass, demanding tribute from miners trying to reach their diggings. These aren't desperate prospectors. They're professional bandits led by a Confederate deserter named Virgil Cossey, men who've turned extortion into a science. Morrison accepts the miner's contract, knowing full well he's walking into what amounts to a siege. The claim jumpers hold the high ground, have superior numbers, and can simply wait him out. Any conventional military mind would declare the situation hopeless. Morrison sees it as an opportunity to demonstrate the power of precision over numbers. For 18 hours, he holds a single position on the canyon's south rim, while 15 armed men try every conceivable tactic to dislodge him. They attempt frontal assaults in groups of 3 and 4. Morrison picks them off with shots that seem to bend the laws of physics. They try flanking maneuvers through side ravines, Bosayan. They even attempt to wait him out, but Morrison has turned patience into a weapon, rationing his water and ammunition with the discipline of a monk. By the battle's end, his ammunition has run so low that he's carving bullets from silver dollars, using his knife to shape crude projectiles that somehow still find their targets with deadly precision. When the surviving claim jumpers finally break and run, they leave behind 11 bodies and a story that spreads like wildfire through every mining camp in the territory. Morrison doesn't just win, he wins so decisively that future claim jumpers give Sunrise Canyon a wide berth for years to come. The second demonstration comes 6 months later at Fort Defiance itself, the place where Morrison learned his craft. 40 Comancheros have cut off the settlement's water supply, confident that thirst will force surrender within days. These are veteran raiders who've learned from Carleton's mistake. They stay mobile, never offering a clear target, using the terrain like a weapon. Morrison's response reveals the true depth of his tactical genius. Rather than hunting the Comancheros directly, he positions himself where they must eventually come to him, at the narrow defile that leads to the settlement's well. But his real innovation lies in the shots themselves. Using techniques learned from Crowfeather about how sound bounces off stone, Morrison begins employing ricochet shots that seem to defy every law of ballistics. Picture this. Enemies taking cover behind massive boulders, thinking themselves safe, suddenly crying out as bullets strike them from impossible angles. Morrison is literally bouncing lead-off canyon walls, calculating trajectories that would challenge a modern computer. His bullets carom off sandstone faces, change direction by 60 degrees, and find targets that have no idea death is coming for them from behind. The psychological effect is devastating. The Comancheros begin to believe they're fighting a supernatural force, 217-19, a man who can shoot around corners, whose bullets seek out hidden enemies like hunting hawks. Within 3 days, the siege collapses, not from military defeat, but from pure terror. Grown men who've faced Apache war parties flee into the desert rather than face Morrison's impossible marksmanship. But it's the third confrontation that truly establishes Morrison's legend beyond all dispute. November 1843, Silver City's Main Street. High noon. A formal duel with Jackson Death's Whisper Caldwell, the most feared gunfighter in the Southwest. Caldwell isn't some frontier braggart or lucky amateur. He's a Mexican war veteran with 37 confirmed kills, the inventor of the Texas windage technique for compensating for crosswinds. His reputation spans from New Orleans to Los Angeles. Men cross streets to avoid him. Sheriffs resign rather than serve warrants with his name on them. When he calls Morrison out, claiming the legend is built on luck and tall tales, every eye in the territory turns toward Silver City. The duel's terms reveal both men's confidence in their abilities. Single shots at 600 yards, a distance that most gunfighters would consider impossibly remote. Firing into the setting sun, so both men must deal with glare that would blind ordinary marksmen. 300 witnesses line Silver City's streets, including journalists from as far away as San Francisco and New York. This isn't just a gunfight, it's a public examination of Morrison's claims to supernatural skill. Morrison's psychological warfare begins before the shooting starts. He arrives dressed in full Apache ceremonial paint, a gift from Standing Eagle, his blood brother from the Mescalero tribe. The war paint isn't just intimidation, it's a statement. Morrison is declaring himself something beyond the normal boundaries of civilization, a force that operates by different rules than ordinary men. Caldwell takes his position with military precision, his modified Walker Colt gleaming in the afternoon sun. He's calculating wind drift, estimating the sun's angle, running through the mathematical formulas that have made him the Southwest's premier long-range killer. Everything about his stance screams professional competence. Morrison's approach seems almost casual by comparison. He doesn't appear to aim in any conventional sense. He doesn't raises his rifle in one fluid motion and fires almost immediately. The casual observer might think he's rushing the shot, abandoning precision for speed. They would be catastrophically wrong. Caldwell's scream echoes off Silver City's adobe walls as Morrison's bullet removes his trigger finger with surgical precision. Not killed, crippled. Not defeated. Humiliated. The message is unmistakable. Morrison could have ended Caldwell's life, but chose instead to end his career, demonstrating a level of control that transcends mere marksmanship. The economic explosion that follows each victory tells its own story. Gun sales increase by 400% as every would-be marksman tries to duplicate Morrison's techniques. Settlements begin bidding against each other for his services like he's a general commanding an army. Shooting competitions spring up across the territory, all using Morrison rules, extreme distances, difficult conditions, and standards that reduce most participants to humbled spectators. But Morrison himself seems increasingly uncomfortable with the monster he's created. The anonymous scout, who once vanished into the mountains, now finds himself trapped by his own legend, pulled inexorably toward a confrontation with forces far more dangerous than claim jumpers or Comancheros. Because in the territories, fame is just another word for target. And Thomas Morrison has just painted the biggest target imaginable on his back. Spring of 1845 finds Thomas Morrison attempting something far more dangerous than facing down 40 armed raiders. He's trying to be ordinary. The legendary marksman who commanded $500 monthly has purchased a modest ranch in Copper Creek Valley, a peaceful fold in the mountains where his closest neighbors are deer and the occasional traveling merchant. He's married Maria Vasquez, daughter of his old mentor Colonel Eduardo, and she's carrying their first child. For 6 months, Morrison lives the life he never knew he wanted. He teaches his son, Thomas Jr., to track rabbits through the scrub oak, showing the boy how to read the stories written in bent grass and disturbed earth. Maria fills their evenings with guitar songs learned in her father's house in Santa Fe, melodies that seem to gentle the harsh edges of frontier life. Together they tend a garden that perfectly captures their blended heritage, Cherokee healing herbs growing alongside Mexican chilies, European vegetables thriving next to native corn. It's paradise. And that's exactly what makes it doomed. Morrison has made a fatal miscalculation. He believes his reputation will protect his family rather than endanger them. He thinks the legend of the untouchable marksman will serve as a shield around Copper Creek Valley, warning potential threats to seek easier prey elsewhere. He's forgotten the fundamental rule of frontier mathematics. For every man who fears a legend, there's another who sees that legend as a challenge to be conquered. While Morrison tends his garden and teaches his son to fish, darker forces are gathering in the territory's shadows. It's not a single enemy. It's a coalition of interests that have found common cause in their hatred of the man who humiliated them all. Relatives of men Morrison killed during his rise to fame. Rival security companies who've lost lucrative contracts to his inflated fees. Political figures who understand that any man with Morrison's skills represents a potential threat to their power structures. The conspiracy is patient, methodical, and absolutely ruthless. They spend months studying Morrison's routines, mapping his ranch, identifying the exact window of vulnerability they need. They know he rides into the high country every Thursday morning to hunt elk for the family's winter meat supply. They know Maria tends the garden alone, while Thomas Jr. practices his letters. They know the ranch sits in a natural bowl that will muffle gunshots until it's far too late for help to arrive. Black Thursday. October 12, 1845. 22 hired killers converge on Copper Creek Valley like a pack of wolves that have finally cornered their prey. These aren't desperate amateurs or opportunistic bandits. They're professional killers recruited from as far away as New Orleans and Denver, men whose only skill is dealing death efficiently and without remorse. Morrison is 15 miles away, tracking a wounded elk through timber so thick the midday sun barely penetrates to the forest floor. He's following blood droplets and broken twigs, completely absorbed in the ancient dance between hunter and prey that Crowfeather taught him decades ago. He has no way of knowing that a different kind of hunt is reaching its climax at his ranch. Maria Vasquez Morrison is hanging laundry when she sees the riders coming down the valley's eastern slope. For a moment, she thinks they might be neighbors or perhaps travelers seeking directions. Then she sees the way they spread out in a coordinated pattern, and maternal instinct screams danger. She runs for the cabin, shouting for Thomas, Jr., to hide in the root cellar. The boy is 8 years old, small for his age, but he carries his father's blood and his grandfather's military training. When Maria presses his father's old pistol into his trembling hands, he doesn't cry or beg. He takes his position by the cabin's main window and waits for orders like a soldier half his age. What follows isn't a battle. It's a massacre designed to send a message that echoes across the entire territory. The 22 killers don't simply murder Morrison's family. They take their time, making sure their work will haunt the legendary marksman's dreams forever. They want him broken, not just bereaved. Thomas Jr. empties his father's pistol at the attackers, his shots going wild but demonstrating the kind of courage that legends are built on. His final act is to reload with shaking hands, still trying to protect his mother even as the cabin door splinters under the killer's axes. Maria's last message, written in blood on the cabin door, consists of 4 words that will reshape the territorial balance of power. They came from Silver City. She dies knowing that her husband will understand the significance, that he'll know exactly where to direct his vengeance. Morrison returns from his hunt as the sun sets, his elk meat packed on his horse, already planning the evening's conversation with Maria about winter preparations. He smells the smoke first, not the comfortable scent of a cooking fire, but the harsh reek of burned timber and worse things. He spurs his horse forward, already knowing with terrible certainty what he'll find. The cabin is ash and blackened timber. His wife and son lie beneath the cottonwood where he proposed to Maria 3 years ago, their bodies positioned with deliberate care by killers who wanted maximum psychological impact. The infant daughter he was planning to name Sarah after his mother is nowhere to be found, presumably taken by the attackers for reasons Morrison doesn't want to contemplate. But it's Maria's blood-written message that transforms grief into something far more dangerous. As Morrison kneels beside the graves he's digging with his bare hands, something fundamental dies inside him. The man who tried to leave the legend behind is gone forever. What rises from Copper Creek Valley is something darker, a precision instrument of vengeance guided by superhuman skill and utterly unconstrained by human morality. The burial takes place by moonlight, Morrison working alone in silence, broken only by the sound of his shovel biting into earth. He speaks no prayers, offers no final words. There will be time for mourning after the killing is finished. The hunt that follows makes Morrison's previous exploits seem like children's games. This isn't random vengeance, it's surgical warfare, waged with Apache tactics and guided by a marksman's precision. Morrison becomes a ghost haunting the territory, appearing without warning, striking with impossible accuracy, vanishing before his enemies can respond. His calling cards become silver bullets with names carved into the lead, personal messages delivered at 800 yards to men who thought themselves safely hidden behind bodyguards and fortified walls. He doesn't simply kill his enemies. He terrorizes them first, letting them know death is coming and proving there's nowhere they can hide. Terror grips the territory as powerful men barricade themselves in makeshift fortresses, hiring armies of bodyguards who desert rather than face Morrison's wrath. Entire towns empty when word spreads that the ghost marksman has been seen in the area. The territorial government offers pardons, bribes, even military commissions, anything to stop the systematic dismantling of their power structure. Morrison ignores every overture. His revenge list contains 37 names, and he works through them with the methodical patience of a clockmaker. Some die from impossible distances. Others discover that locked doors and armed guards provide no protection against a man who learned Apache stealth techniques from Standing Eagle. A few try to flee the territory entirely, only to learn that Morrison's reach extends far beyond New Mexico's borders. Christmas Eve, 1845. Judge Harold Blackwood, the last name on Morrison's list, cowers behind steel-reinforced shutters in his Silver City mansion. Blackwood is the political mastermind who orchestrated the conspiracy, a man whose corruption runs so deep that even his bodyguards know they're protecting pure evil. He's surrounded by 12 armed guards. His windows are covered with armor plating, and his doors are barricaded with railroad ties. Morrison's final shot threads through a 2-inch gap where the armored shutters don't quite meet, traveling 150 yards through Blackwood's mansion to find its target with mathematical precision. The bullet bears a simple engraving: Sarah. When Morrison walks away from Blackwood's mansion, he leaves behind more than just the last member of the conspiracy. He abandons the final vestige of his humanity, burned away in the fires of Copper Creek Valley. What emerges from that Christmas Eve confrontation isn't Thomas Morrison anymore. It's something far more dangerous, a perfect killing machine that his enemy's cruelty has forged into existence, and the frontier will never be the same. The creature that emerges from Judge Blackwood's mansion on Christmas Eve 1845 bears Thomas Morrison's face, carries his rifle, and possesses his supernatural marksmanship. But the man who once taught his son to track rabbits and tended a garden with his wife is gone forever, consumed in the furnace of vengeance like his family's cabin. What remains is something the frontier has never seen before, a perfect predator operating beyond the boundaries of human emotion or morality. For 2 years, this ghost haunts the New Mexico territory with methodical precision. Morrison no longer hunts for money or contracts or even personal satisfaction. He kills because killing has become his only remaining language, the sole means by which he communicates with a world that destroyed everything he loved. Every shot is a statement. Every death is a paragraph in a manifesto written in blood. The territorial government's response reveals the depth of their terror. First come desperate attempts at negotiation, IAC, pardons for crimes never officially committed, bribes that would make Morrison wealthier than territorial governors, even offers of military commissions that would grant him legal authority to kill his enemies. Morrison ignores every overture with the contempt they deserve. Men who orchestrate the murder of children don't deserve negotiation, they deserve extinction. When diplomacy fails, they resort to the frontier's ultimate solution. They place a bounty on Morrison's head that staggers even hardened professionals. $50,000. In 1846, that's enough money to buy a small town or equip a private army. The poster appears in every saloon, trading post, and sheriff's office from California to Texas, bearing Morrison's likeness and a description of his abilities that reads like folklore rather than fact. The bounty draws killers from across the continent like moths to a flame. Professional gunfighters abandon lucrative contracts. Military deserters see their chance for redemption and riches. Even aging mountain men come out of retirement, lured by the prospect of enough money to live like kings for the rest of their lives. They arrive in New Mexico by the dozens, each convinced that Morrison's reputation is exaggerated, that no man can truly possess the supernatural abilities attributed to the frontier's deadliest legend. They're about to learn otherwise. The final confrontation comes in June of 1847 at Eagle's Perch, the mountain overlook where Morrison once proposed to Maria beneath a canopy of stars. 20 elite bounty hunters have tracked him there through patience, skill, and sheer bloody-minded determination. These aren't desperate amateurs or glory-seeking cowboys. They're seasoned professionals who've made careers of hunting dangerous men. Their leader is Marcus Iron Hand Thompson, a former Army sharpshooter who lost his left hand to a Confederate sniper's bullet but learned to shoot even better with a prosthetic hook. Thompson has studied Morrison's methods for months, analyzed his previous battles, and developed tactics specifically designed to counter the Ghost Marksman's advantages. The battle plan seems sound. Surround Morrison on Eagle's Perch, coordinate their attacks to prevent him from picking them off individually, and use their numerical superiority to overwhelm even superhuman marksmanship. Thompson has positioned his men in a perfect circle around the mountain's peak, each hunter equipped with high-quality rifles and enough ammunition to level a small building. What unfolds over the next 6 hours defies every law of physics and military strategy that these professional killers understand. Morrison doesn't just fight them, he toys with them, appearing and disappearing among the rocks like smoke given human form. His shots come from impossible angles, fired from positions that no human being should be able to reach or escape. The hunters find themselves shooting at shadows, their carefully coordinated attacks collapsing into panic as Morrison seems to materialize from solid stone. Some swear they see him walk through their bullets without flinching. Others claim he vanishes into cliff faces that offer no conceivable hiding places. By sunset, their professional confidence has disintegrated into supernatural terror. When rescue parties reach Eagle's Perch 3 days later, they find 17 bodies scattered across the mountainside like broken dolls. The 3 survivors huddle together in a natural cave, their eyes vacant, their minds shattered by exposure to something beyond human comprehension. They babble about Morrison walking through bullets, vanishing into solid rock, firing shots that seem to bend space itself to reach their targets. Iron Hand Thompson's body is found at the mountain's peak, positioned so he faces west toward the setting sun. Morrison's final bullet has removed Thompson's prosthetic hand with surgical precision. Not a killing shot, but a message. The hook lies beside the body, its steel fingers clutching a note written in Morrison's careful script. Even iron breaks. But it's Morrison's final confirmed appearance that provides the most haunting punctuation to his legend. July 4th, 1847. Fort Defiance's Independence Day celebration. The entire settlement has gathered for speeches, competitions, and the kind of forced patriotism that frontier communities use to convince themselves they're still connected to civilization. Morrison walks through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. Conversations stop mid-sentence. Children hide behind their mothers' skirts. Grown men who've faced down Apache war parties and mountain lions step aside rather than block his path. He's not threatening anyone, not even carrying his rifle in a ready position, but his mere presence radiates such concentrated menace that the celebration transforms into a silent vigil. He stops at Joseph Crowfeather's grave, marked with traditional Cherokee symbols and the weathered remains of his mentor's favorite hunting bow. Morrison places his custom rifle across the grave marker with the reverence of a pilgrim laying offerings at a sacred shrine. Beside the weapon, he leaves a note that will be discovered hours later. The student surpasses the teacher only to discover he has learned nothing. Then Thomas Morrison walks into the desert sunset and vanishes from recorded history forever. The mystery of his disappearance spawns theories that persist for decades. Apache scouts claim they saw him riding south toward Mexico, joining Standing Eagle's band in their hidden strongholds beyond the Rio Grande. Spiritualists insist that Maria's ghost called him into the next world, offering the reunion that earthly life had denied them. A few practical-minded folks suggest he simply changed his name and disappeared into the vast anonymity of the frontier. The truth, perhaps, matters less than the legacy he leaves behind. Morrison's shooting techniques are incorporated into military training manuals that influence firearms instruction for decades. His rifle design becomes the foundation for improvements that won't be fully realized until the advent of precision manufacturing. Gunsmiths across the territory attempt to duplicate his revolutionary rifling patterns, though none achieve his level of consistency. The cultural impact proves even more enduring. Mothers warn children that Morrison's ghost still watches from the mountains, punishing those who prey on the innocent. The mere mention of his name causes hardened criminals to reconsider their chosen profession. 112 men claim to be Morrison over the following decades, but none can replicate his impossible shots or demonstrate his supernatural precision. Modern ballistics experts who study surviving accounts insist his famous achievements were physically impossible, that no rifle of his era could have achieved such accuracy at such distances, that environmental factors would have made his shots pure luck rather than skill. But descendants of witnesses maintain their family stories with religious fervor, passing down detailed accounts of impossible marksmanship that transcended the normal boundaries of human ability. In 1923, archaeologists exploring Eagle's Perch discover an unmarked grave in a natural cave near the mountain's peak. The skeleton clutches a guitar pick made from Mexican silver, engraved with the initials M.V., Maria Vasquez. The location suggests Morrison chose reunion over survival, returning to the place where he'd once found happiness to wait for death in solitude. But even in death, the legend refuses to rest quietly. Hikers still report seeing a lone figure on Eagle's Perch at sunset, rifle in hand, standing eternal watch over the valley where civilization meets the wilderness. They say if you listen carefully on quiet nights, you can hear the distant echo of an impossible shot, fired by a man who transcended human limitations only to discover that some prices are too high for any mortal soul to pay. Thomas Morrison sought to protect his family through reputation, and failed. He tried to achieve justice through vengeance and found only emptiness. In the end, he discovered what the Cherokee had always known, that some spirits are too large for earthly bodies to contain, and some legends too powerful for their creators to survive. The frontier remembers him not as a man, but as a force of nature, beautiful and terrible as lightning, inevitable as sunrise, and forever beyond the reach of those who would seek to understand or control it.